Good evening. Exactly. Welcome. We're starting Igeres HaTeshuva, which is the third section of Tanya, which talks about, you guessed it, Tshuva. And the Rabbi says that in the month of Elul, or as a preparation to Rosh Hashanah, we should be learning these 12 chapters of Igeres HaTeshuva. Now, Igeres HaTeshuva doesn't talk about how one should tshuva, doesn't talk about why someone should do tshuva, and so on. There are many sources for this and many ways to read up and learn about why you should do tshuva or how you should do tshuva. But here we're going to take the Hasidic explanation and understand much deeper what's tshuva really, what is it not, and then along the way a lot of details of how one should properly do tshuva. So we begin with a brisa. The section begins like this: Perek Aleph, Tanya b'Seif Yuma. It's brought. We learned in a brisa, which is an unpublished Mishnah, in the tractate of Yuma. Yuma is the volume of Talmud which talks about Yom Kippur, and what day better than Yom Kippur to speak about tshuva that represents tshuva. But he speaks over there in the brisa. He brings three types of kapara, three types of atonement. Utshuva and kol echad. The three categories of atonement, and each one of these atonements has tshuva together with it. What are they? One category is a person who transgressed a positive mitzvah. That means he has to put on tefillin every day, every weekday, and he didn't. He didn't commit a crime in the sense of transgress and do an avera. Rather, he missed an opportunity to do a positive mitzvah. Okay, something that he could have done and he had to do, and he didn't do it. What happens then? As long as he did tshuva properly, he doesn't move from there until he is forgiven. Which basically means like this: he just forgot to put on tefillin. Let's say he did it on purpose. He wasn't in the mood. He didn't put on tefillin, and then he realizes what happened, and he feels bad, so he does tshuva. If he does a proper tshuva, he is forgiven, and it's done, fixed. If a person transgressed a negative commandment, which means he did something that he wasn't supposed to do, okay? Let's see an example of he ate something he shouldn't eat, a non-kosher food, on purpose, knowingly. He knows what kosher is. He's not new to the concept. He gets it, and he ate it anyways. Okay. In such a case, it's not enough that he does tshuva, but tshuva is toila. Tshuva is hanging in the balance. It's in a suspense. And then when it comes to Yom Kippur, that brings the atonement. So if he missed tefillin, or he missed a mitzvah of doing that he should have done and he didn't do it, so then do tshuva and Hashem forgives you, even before Yom Kippur. But if you did something wrong, you transgressed something, now in order to fix that, tshuva itself is not enough. It's a part, but you're like under contract. When Yom Kippur comes, then you have the forgiveness and it's taken care of. Pirush, which means as follows: that even though normally we say that a mitzvah's aseh is greater because it pushes off a mitzvah's leis aseh. For example, we know we have a commandment: you're not allowed to wear shatnez. Shatnez means wool and linen together. You can't wear a garment that has the same garment has wool and linen in it, right? You could have a shirt, a linen shirt, and a wool pants, but you can't have it on the same garment. It's a negative commandment. Now, if a person has tzitzis, and the tzitzis have in them shatnez, meaning it has wool and linen together, we say that the positive overrides the negative, and he could wear the tzitzis anyways. So in a sense, what's more powerful? What's stronger? It's the positive mitzvah, right? Because the positive mitzvah has the ability to override the negative one. Mm-hmm. But if you look at tshuva, what's easier to fix? A positive or a negative? It's easier to fix a positive. A positive, we said, just do tshuva and you're forgiven. A negative, we said, Don't worry about it. I mean, do tshuva, and then you have to wait till Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur will finish off the atonement. So in a sense, a mitzvah's asay is easier to do tshuva for, but at the same time, you say it's more powerful and it can push away a negative. The reason for this is because when a person does a positive mitzvah, what happens when you do the mitzvah is you're bringing forth a certain light and spiritual energy from the high worlds, from infinite Hashem, which because of the Zohar tells us a secret that the 248 positive mitzvahs that we have, they correspond to the 248 limbs of the king. So every time you do a mitzvah, we don't necessarily know which limb it corresponds, but you're connecting to Hashem, who doesn't have a physical body, obviously, but you're connecting to Hashem on a specific way, and you're bringing forth a light into this world. You ate matzah, you brought a certain light into this world. You put on tefillin, you brought a certain energy into this world. The Gaon Nafshei Lekis, also on his godly soul, not just to the world do you bring this spiritual energy, but also to your neshama itself gets another level of holiness. What do we say before every bracha? Right. Asher kiddushan b'mitzvahs. Your mitzvahs make us kodesh, they make us holy. That is all in regards to the power of a mitzvah. So our question is like this: if I have a positive mitzvah and I have a negative mitzvah, they're in a contradiction. I want to put on tzitzis, but my tzitzis has wool and linen together, and you're not allowed to wear wool and linen. So it's either or. Either I'm going to put on tzitzis, or I'm going to refrain from wearing shatnez. We say that the positive overrides the negative. Okay? But in a sense, we just said that it's harder to do tshuva when you did a sin, a transgression of a leisase, versus if you missed a positive mitzvah. A guy didn't put on tefillin one day. He does tshuva, he's forgiven. A guy ate treif, he does tshuva, and then he has to wait till Yom Kippur. And then it finishes the atonement. And the reason why there's a difference, or it seems that it's a little bit more stringent or powerful when it comes to the fact that it could override a negative commandment, it's because it has this ability that it brings forth a special energy. So because of what it brings with it, it overrides a negative commandment. Avol inyan tshuva, when it comes to tshuva itself, even though they forgive him on the punishment, because the fact that he rebelled against Hashem, nonetheless, the light is lacking. Here's what happens. It's not that the mitzvah's asay is easier to take care of. There's something which you can't fix. And here's what it is, at a basic level. What happens when you put on tefillin on Monday morning? You bring forth a certain light. What happens if you eat treif? If a person eats treif, non-kosher, he's causing a blemish in his soul. That blemish you could clean up. Right? You should totally clean up. The mitzvah, the light that brings, you can't bring that back anymore. You missed it. You could do it tomorrow, but you're not going to make up for what you missed. Now, there's a higher level of tshuva where you could even retroactively take care of things, but on a basic level. So you're done. You did tshuva, you resolve not to do it again, and you go on to the next day. Hashem forgives you because you mean it. Mm-hmm. When it comes to a negative commandment, it's not enough just that you moved on. It has to be cleaned up. There's dirt from that Aveira. Mm-hmm. Yom Kippur has the power and the ability and the potency to fix that. And that's why you have to wait to Yom Kippur for that to happen. Like it says, Chazal tell us, what is an example of a mitzvah that you can't fix? A sin that you can't fix?
Having a child.
Very good. That's one, yeah. Even though they did all the tshuva in the world, but there's a mamzer. There's an illegitimate child that exists. You can do all the tshuva in the world. Hashem can forgive him, but there's still something that was created as a result and a consequence or an impact of his sin, which is there. Okay. The example that Chazal give us, someone that missed Krishma Shal Arvis, for example. At night, you have to say Shema. You have to say Shema in the morning. You have to say Shema at night. He missed Shema at night. right? What happens now? The option is even though from now on he's very careful. And say he doesn't eat before Ma'ariv, and he makes sure he doesn't forget to say Shema, and he's very, very careful, right? And it won't happen again. The Shachas and morning Shema as well. But Ein Shuvah can't correct what you missed one day. That Sunday night he missed Shema. You're careful from now on. You're not going to be punished. Hashem forgives you. Everything is fine. But whatever would have been accomplished through saying Shema on that day, it's gone. That day is missing. Today you can say Shema for today, but not for yesterday. But if someone does an Aveira, he transgresses a negative commandment, and Hashem says, don't eat this, for example, and he did, then through the fact that this the bad is now attached to his soul, you're now causing a nick, a blemish, a problem in the source of your neshama, where it comes from. You let's call it dirt, or let's call it the way he calls it, a blemish, right? And you're causing a blemish in the neshama. What happens now? Now it's not I missed it, forgive me. Now I got to clean it. Mm-hmm. How do I clean that off? Yom Kippur does that. Yom Kippur doesn't fill in the tefillin that I missed. I did tshuva, I'm forgiven, there's no punishment. But whatever I'm lacking can't be filled. But the leisase, the negative commandment that I transgressed, is a blemish that has to be cleaned off or cleaned up. Not only does it cause a blemish in the source of the neshama, where it comes from, in our source, but also in the way it plays out, or the way it comes forth in the 10 spheres of this world. Therefore, you can do tshuva, but you're not going to have a true atonement until Yom Kippur happens. As the verse tells us, that Yom Kippur has the power, the ability, it will atone for the impurities of the Yidden, and from their transgressions, their wrongdoings. Before Hashem, you will be purified. In front, before Hashem, which represents, we're not going to get into it, but it represents a high level of godliness, and you're going to reach a level which is even higher than that, which has the ability to fix wrongdoings. Therefore, don't learn any leniency, or don't measure or treat a positive mitzvah somehow less important than a negative commandment. What happened here is like this. We had a brisa, and the brisa tells us that when you do, there's 3 types of tshuva, 3 types of kapara, atonement, and there's tshuva with each one. And we started to explain that when a person misses a positive commandment, all you need is tshuva, and the next day, the same day, you're forgiven. When it comes to a negative commandment, you're not forgiven the same day. You're forgiven, but there's this like balance. It's hanging. It's not done until Yom Kippur comes. So you may think that, a mitzvah's essay is not such a big deal, because you do tshuva, Hashem forgives you right away. A negative commandment, you got to wait till Yom Kippur. It has to be forgiven. Yada yada. So that's probably a big deal. But mitzvah's essay, okay, so you missed tefillin, God forbid, right? Not only that, but a mitzvah's essay overrides a leis essay. Why? Because there's a certain spiritual energy that's brought into the world and into your neshama when you do that mitzvah. Now, why should you not view a positive mitzvah as somehow less important? If you look at what it takes to fix it, it's much easier to fix missing a mitzvah than it is to fix an aveira, right? Fixing a mitzvah happens right when you do tshuva. Fixing an aveira, you got to wait all the way till Yom Kippur, because you're trying to accomplish 2 different things. The fact that you're trying to bring down something which you missed, it's not going to happen unless you reach a very high level of tshuva. You want forgiveness, you got forgiveness, but you're not cleaning anything up. So because you have to clean something, that's why you have to wait till Yom Kippur. Okay. But don't learn any type of leniency regarding a lack of doing a positive mitzvah, or regarding, for example, the mitzvah of learning Torah. A person shouldn't say, it's not such a big deal. On the contrary, Amr Razal, Hashem has overlooked or forgiven or let it pass, even on Aveda of Aveda Zara in certain cases of idol worship. Hashem was okay, so to speak, or forgave easily the transgression of idol worship, even though the punishment is very strong. It's krisus and Mrs. Bezdin. It carries the death penalty. But when it came to missing Talmud Torah, when a person has the ability to learn, he just wastes his time and doesn't learn, Hashem did not forgive on that so quickly. So don't view a mitzvah's assay and say, not a big deal. Okay, so far we have two categories of three. We have positive mitzvah, what do you have to do to fix it? Tshuva. Negative commandment, what do you have to do to fix it?
Tshuva and
Yom Kippur. Overall, Christus Mrs. Bezdin, but if a person transgressed something which carries with it the kares punishment, getting cut off, like eating on Yom Kippur, for example, or other types of lavin, Mrs. Bezdin, or things that carry the death penalty, like breaking Shabbos and so on. Shuva v'Yom Kippurim Teilin, Shuva and Yom Kippur together hangs in the balance, meaning he's now under contract or suspended in some way. The Yisurin Memarkin, when a person has some type of suffering, pain, inconveniences even, they clean off the Aveda. So positive mitzvah, all he needs is tshuva. Negative mitzvah, he needs tshuva and Yom Kippur. Krisus and Mrs. Bezdin, he needs tshuva, Yom Kippur, and Yisurin. Now it's brought in Gemara about a Tana or a Meir, I don't remember now, who put his hand in his pocket to take out some money. And he wasn't in the right pocket. It's so frustrating. Where's my money? It was in the other pocket. And he said that inconvenience or frustration of having to go to the other pocket, that's Memarkin. That's already called Yisurin.
That's once every 40 days.
What?
So, once every 40 days. That's another Gemara.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I answer once every 40 days.
The point is that it doesn't have to be chas v'shalom, some kind of suffering that a person has to go through. But a person has some kind of inconvenience.
That's almost suffering. You go to the other pocket.
Frustration.
Frustration.
Also, if chas v'shalom someone is suffering, you should never say, "Oh, they must be fixing something that they've done wrong." Must be a level of tshuva. God forbid. You could say that about oneself, not about other people. Chas v'shalom. But you should never have the opportunity to say it about yourself either.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that Yisurin doesn't have to mean the Yisurin of Eiv. Okay, some inconveniences. What does it mean? Pirush goyim na kapara. They complete the atonement. Merika is from the lashon of rinsing off or washing away to shine the soul. Kapara is from the same term as wiping away. You wipe away the dirt of the Aveda. Shenamar, as it says, of a kadati v'shevet pisham and v'goyim Aveda. Okay, so this is the end of the brayso. We have three categories. You miss a mitzvah say, what you need to do is tshuva. You're forgiven right away. If someone did a leisa say he transgressed, he committed something he shouldn't have done. If it's a lav, it's a prohibition, then he does tshuva, and Yom Kippur comes, he's forgiven. If he did something a little bit more extreme, which would carry kares or mitzvahs bezdin, then tshuva and Yom Kippur still keep it in the balance. It still hangs, but Yisur and Memarkin, the inconveniences of life and the frustrations, they bring the kapara. That's why there's a term people say, he lost his wallet, kapara. His phone broke, kapara. It's an atonement.
So Zion kapara.
Yeah. Why? Because that's what it is. Okay. Now, I thought I was going to get into a little bit more in detail. What is mitzvah as tshuva? What does tshuva mean biblically? There's obviously many layers to tshuva. But what is the mitzvah of tshuva min ha-Torah? I want to just give a brief introduction that everything in Tanya is very specific, very accurate. Even which words Alter Rebbe used are very specific. Not only that, but even a letter, to have an extra letter in a word or not, is also very specific. How much more so the making up of the Tanya, meaning the sections of Tanya. Tanya has 4 sections, which correspond to the 4 letters of Shem Havai, Yud Kei Vav Kei. It also corresponds to the 4 sections of Shulchan Aruch. Kutei Amarim is corresponding to Eirech Chaim of Shulchan Aruch. Sha'ar Yichud Emunah corresponds to the 2nd section of Shulchan Aruch, which is Yedei Deya. And the 3rd section, which is what we're learning, is Igeres HaTeshuva, corresponds to Even HaEzer. And the last one is Chesed Mishpat. Even HaEzer talks about laws of marriage. Why does the Alter Rebbe put Igeres HaTeshuva with corresponding as the 3rd one that lines up with Igeres, with Even HaEzer? So the Rebbe says, and the El Comedy would teach this section of Tanya, would explain this in great detail or at length, that when a Yid does a mitzvah, Asher Kiddushan b'mitzvah, so that's similar to the idea of Kiddushin of marriage. A person is marrying a wife, Hashem is married to the Yidden, and we're doing a mitzvah. A person, Chas v'shalom, breaks a mitzvah, so he's violating that, he's leaving that relationship. So the concept of tshuva is the return ability, the bringing back together, where a Yid is coming again to the Eibishter. It's the whole idea of ishus, what it represents. So minat Torah, hine mitzvahs hatshuva minat Torah, hi azivas hachet bilvad. The mitzvah of tshuva, biblically, all it is, just don't do the avera anymore. That's tshuva. You're stopping to do it. As the Gemara in the 3rd paragraph of Sanhedrin says, and Chesed Mishpat, at the end of Simon Lamed regarding Eidos, a person is not always believed to bear testimony. But if you stop doing the Avera that you were doing, let's say it was a certain level of gambling, a person is gambling for a living, or other types of things. When we stop doing it, we trust his witness now. Now there's other levels. How do you know a person's actually not going back to it? How do you know that his tshuva is sincere, and so on? But the basic minat Torah, tshuva, is stopping to do the Avera.
What about vidui?
That's part of it.
Rambam says that vidui is the derisive level is tshuva.
Okay, so there's 3 parts to tshuva. There's regretting what he did, vidui, confessing not to a human like other people do, but to Hashem, and then resolving never to do it again. But if we're going to go to understand what tshuva represents, we're going to zero in and dissect it to the basic tshuva is leave the Avera, which means sheyigmar beliba, you should make a resolve in his heart, believe shalom with a complete heart, I'm not returning back to that type of behavior. That's number 1. What's the behavior? To rebel against Hashem, but he's never going to transgress the mitzvah of Hashem again. God forbid. Tshuva, leaving the Avera means like this. A person, he didn't put on tefillin. Okay? This tshuva represents his resolve never to miss tefillin again and not to transgress anything else that Hashem says. And with a complete resolve not to go back to that. Which means it's not just about that particular mitzvah. Okay? It's an attitude. I am going to do what Hashem wants. I didn't do it in a particular case, whether he violated something or he missed something, but from now on, I'm going to do what he wants. That's the basic idea of tshuva. That's the main explanation of tshuva, to return to Hashem. It's not about repenting. It's not about all these other things that are accurate and part of the process of regret and resolve. It's all correct. But the main thing is that he makes a decision to not to transgress what Hashem says, to return to Hashem with his whole heart, his whole being, to serve him, to keep all of his mitzvahs. To be continued in mitzvah. You got any line for the moment?